Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Happy Wine Day. This week was National Drink Wine Day, was a couple days ago, which was really fantastic to have a legitimate excuse to open up a really nice bottle of wine. I hope everyone else opened up a really nice bottle of wine at some point this week. Really excited about tonight's class. I'm excited about every class. I really am. I love nerding out about wine with people who are also interested in learning more besides just chug and drink, or drink and chug. They're the same thing. Never mind. But it's just really interesting to be able to taste wine with people who care about the why behind the what they love to drink. Why does this taste different? Why is this region more important than the region right next to it? Why are these vineyards special? What makes the chemistry of this wine unique from a different wine? So all of the why behind what we love to drink is what I love to delve into. And I love sharing that information with people who also care. I did a private event last night, and it was so amazing to just really get into wines with people and actually see people in real life, face to face. Was really awesome. So thank you all so much for tuning in to these classes about caring about wine education, about not just drinking really great wine, but appreciating what makes it great to begin with. So if you're tuning in live, please tell me where you're coming from in the chat room. If this is your first time, I know there's some people who are newer to the virtual classes. If you're watching this on live and can't log into the chat room, it's probably because you're not signed in to YouTube, like your email account that's connected to YouTube. If you are signed in, you'll be able to participate in the chat room. That is crucial for me just to get your tasting notes on the wine, but also to get your questions on the wines too. Since it's not like Zoom, you don't have to be on camera and the stress that comes with the Zoom fatigue and all that stuff. I do these on YouTube, but it's really important to have that chat room available. So thanks so much for tuning in. Hi, Kira. I love it whenever I get to say that. It's so rare. Glad that you get to make it as well. Some mom and some pop here. Everyone say hello to them. It was great. I did the private event that I did last night. Some mom had delivered the wine to them, and they were so upset that they didn't get to meet Sama. They said they waited out like on the front porch trying to make sure that they could get to her, and they missed her by like 30 seconds and just saw the Sommobile drive away. And but it's just really awesome to see that, again, that connection, that community that happens with time. So Mary and Chris, great to see y'all as well. And Kira's doing it all the way from California. Fabulous. Don't worry, even if you don't have these wines, we're going to have a lot of information about the region in general, so it will be informative and fun. Kira, what are you drinking? Please do tell us if it's not these wines. So James and Danielle coming from Virginia Beach. Great to see y'all. Bob and Gail from Williamsburg. I'm glad y'all get to tune in live. I think this is the first time in a while that you've been able to tune in live. It's fabulous. Lex and Trey, great to see you. Marion and Tom, also my old world drinkers. I know y'all are excited about this class specifically. Aiden Allen, great to see you. Need some more Corvin practice. We can do a one-on-one if you like. So if you didn't know, Corvin is the contraption that you can use to access the wine without opening it. I did a training session up on YouTube. That's up on YouTube this week. So if you didn't get to tune in live on that Zoom training session, you can watch it. But anytime you have more specific questions that weren't covered in any video, you all have my information. Please reach out with anything. I'm here for you. Let's see, Rick and Julie from Williamsburg, Melissa and Peter. Hello. Super excited. Drinking a cab. Okay, fabulous. No Cabernet really in Southern Rhône, but you can tell us all about your tasting notes on this wine, and we'll tell you about our tasting notes on these Southern Rhône wines. So if you haven't already, we are going to start off with wine number 1, which is the white wine of the group. Chateau Pisky. It's their Terrasse Blanc. So generally speaking, in Southern Rhône, so throughout France, you generally don't say the S on the end of French words, but in Southern Rhône, just like in Southern United States, the accent's slightly different. So throughout this area, we will actually be saying the S on the end. So just like Vaccaras, the region of our wine number 3, the S on the end throughout the rest of France might not be pronounced, but in this area it is. So I I just call it Baccarat. Yes, so we are going to be trying this first white wine. And if you have these wonderful maps, this is my favorite producer of maps that I get, vineyards.com. They're the easiest to print because everything is like a white background behind instead of everything being this dark color. So it's easier for me to print them. And they're so clear and really brilliantly labeled. So if you're ever looking for good wine maps, this is my favorite. Wine Folly makes excellent maps. I really enjoy them, but definitely more difficult to print because every single surface area is covered in dark pigment, especially when printing out 25 copies for everyone tuning into these classes. So we're going to be talking about why Southern Rhône is different from the Northern Rhône, and each of these regions in specific. We are going to also just delve into how these wines taste and how hopefully delicious they are. So let's go ahead, just pour yourself a rather large glass of the first wine. We are starting in the area of Vento. Go ahead and you can sample this. I'm going to discuss Rhône Valley in general and why Southern Rhône is so different than Northern Rhône. You don't have to wait. Go ahead and start sipping that first white wine. No problem. All right. So Vento here is, trying to find the region here. Of course, I picked the one map that Vento isn't listed. So let's just talk about Southern Rhône and Northern Rhône here. So Northern Rhône is this tall, skinny region right by the Rhône River on either side, so the east and west banks of the river. And then Southern Rhône, if this were a spoon, then Southern Rhône would be like the larger bowl of the spoon throughout here. So Northern Rhône is so different than Southern Rhône. That's why these classes can't really be combined, or at least combined well. So for 3 reasons, they are drastically different. One is aspect, and that just means like how the vineyards are laid out. 2 is terroir, so climate and soil type specifically, we'll discuss. And then 3, the way the wines themselves are made. So aspect, Northern Rhône, very, very steep cliffs, sometimes over 45-degree angles. That's very steep, that cannot be harvested, vineyards can't grow on these. People can't tend to vineyards on these very steep slopes unless they're terraced, meaning like a staircase built into the slope by building up rock formations to hold a staircase formation for the vineyards. If you don't have those terraces, these vineyards are way too steep for humans to be able to farm well and safely. There are plenty of stories of farmers dying on these slopes because they are so steep and they're slipping and falling. So the aspect themselves, very, very, very steep and right by the river edge. So they don't sprawl out from the river edge. It's really just the steep slopes right on either side of the river that make up the best terroir, the best regions, the best vineyards of Northern Rhône. Very granitic slopes too. So now we're talking about terroir and soil type and climate. Deep granite cliffs that have to be kind of almost like decomposed enough so that the vines can even penetrate them. So we're not broken up marine sedimentary soils. This is very hard rock formations here. So soil type is different. Climate is also different too. We're way more continental in climate than we are Mediterranean in the Southern Rhône region. So we're going to have cooler areas. We're going to have cooler nights, especially, so that higher degree diurnal temperature variation in the Northern Rhône, where you have a lot more warmer days, but then the temperature drops down drastically at night, and colder winters as well. So climate different, aspect different, terroir different, and the way they make the wines is really different too. So in Southern Rhône, you have blends. It's all about those blends. Now I want to sing that song, I'm all about that bass, but now I want to say all about those blends, Now that's going to be stuck in my head, and hopefully yours as well. So that's Southern Rhône. In the Northern Rhône, they're all about varietal wines. And what I mean by that is a grape variety, when it's made into wine and not blended, it's called a varietal wine. This is the adjective. So if I have 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, then that is a varietal wine. 100% Pinot Grigio is a varietal wine. If you have a blend like we are drinking now, this white wine, Viognier, Grenache Blanc, Roussanne, and Claret, that's a blend of 4 varieties. So in the North, generally speaking, not all the time, they are focused on varietal wines, especially for their red wines. Syrah is the only grape that is red that grows in the northern Rhône area of France. In the south of Rhône, in southern Rhône, you have a lot more grape varieties, over 24 different grape varieties, and the primary grape is actually Grenache, but Syrah is the only red grape in northern Rhône. Sometimes it is co-fermented or blended with white grapes, but never with other red grapes. That's another class itself, northern Rhône, but I just wanted to highlight the differences. So in southern Rhône, instead of those steep cliffs, you have these rolling, undulating hills from like rolling hills to almost just like slight slopes. But when you talk about the Côtes de Rhône, you're talking about the hills of the Rhône Valley. So there are small hills, but none of them steep, none of them that like you'd break a sweat if you were like riding a bike up it or anything like that. So hilly regions instead of steep slopes. And instead of hard granitic soils, you have a mix of sand, clay, gravel, marine sedimentary soils. And when it comes to Châteauneuf-du-Pape, you have the galets. So galets are these huge river rocks that are super round and smooth, and they're very white. They reflect the light of the sun really brilliantly. We'll talk about why that's so important when we get to the Châteauneuf-du-Pape at the very end. Very different than these hard, dark granitic soils of the northern Rhône. So difference in aspect, difference in soil, difference in climate too. So we're more Mediterranean, so we're warmer across the board. We don't have those huge diurnal temperature variations. We have warm days and warmish nights, cooler for sure, but definitely not as dropping down as much as they do in the northern Rhône. Not quite as drastically hot summer nights as we have here in the Hampton Roads area, where it's 95 degrees during the day and then 93 degrees at night. But definitely not this huge temperature variation shift of like 50 degrees. One of the big things, though, that's common between both areas is the Les Mistral winds. So these are these intense winds that basically get sucked up through the Rhône Valley from the southern, near the Mediterranean. And because of just the cool air shifts that create these howling, very intense winds that can gust up to over 65 miles an hour. And it's not just at one time during the year, like hurricane season or the rainy season. It's throughout the entire year that these Les Mistral winds are howling and really intense throughout the area. In the northern Rhône area, though, you have these steep cliffs, and so based on the aspects that your vineyards are facing, you might be more affected by them or not. But by the rolling hills of southern Rhône, you don't have a lot of protection from these winds, so they can be pretty intense on the vines. The vines in southern Rhône struggle a lot. It is warm. They have the most sunlight in this area, one of the sunniest regions in all of France. I think Alsace might be slightly sunnier by like 1 or 2 more hours annual sunlight on average. But southern Rhône, you have loads of sunlight. And so it's just like the sun beating down on these areas. You have these really intense winds and in this hot Mediterranean climate as well. So the grapes are definitely interesting, and they're rustic, and they are vibrant. They speak of the struggle of the actual vines. So as we all know, struggle builds character. That's why we have to do chores as a kid and stuff like that, and get jobs and adult. But struggle also builds character in vines themselves. So the more a vine thinks that it's dying, the more intensity it's going to put into producing the best grapes ever that are going to attract those birds, so the birds can help propagate the vine's seed throughout the universe. So that's the whole point. So the more the vine thinks that it's not going to survive till next year, the more it's going to put all its energy into producing really amazing grapes. That's why when vines struggle, the wine is actually better. So we're going to talk about how each of these vines areas that we're going to be tasting tonight struggle a little bit differently. But these Les Mistral winds are important because they're so windy, this area in southern Rhône, that when you don't ever plant vines by the seed, you grow them in a nursery, and you grow them until they're little saplings, and then you'll plant them in the ground. And they have to be planted in the ground at this intense angle into the wind, so that as the wind continues to blow the grapevine over this way, by the time it's over here, the roots are at least dug deep enough, which happens in the first 3 to 5 years, is about 30% of the root vine structure that it will ever have is developed in those first 3 to 5 years. They've developed enough so that the wind won't uproot the grapevines. If it weren't for that, those grapevines would just keep blowing out and being uprooted by the wind. They also don't trellis them high. You drive through Virginia, or if you're in California and you see these grapevines and they're trellised up high on these lines and kind of tied up and stuff, and it's beautiful. No, these are kind of gnarly looking bush vines, trellised very low to the ground, so back-breaking work to work these fields, because they cannot be trellised up high in order, because they would be uprooted if they were. So it's just kind of the backdrop of why Southern Rhône is so different than Northern Rhône. It's almost like having two siblings, and when you meet them, you're like, how are you related? I don't see it. You're not similar in the way you look and the way you talk and what you do for a living, like personality-wise, interest-wise. I almost need a DNA test to know that y'all are related. It's kind of like that for Northern Rhône and Southern Rhône. You just think about all the ways that they're different, and you taste their wines side by side. Why they decided to just call it all the Rhône Valley and then separate the two instead of just calling them two separate regions, I don't know. I ain't French, and I wasn't born in the 1910s when all of these things were being decided. If I could say it right now, then I would probably call them different regions, but it's definitely, they didn't ask me. Maybe they will one day. So we're going to be tasting through these wines, and if you want to try all three reds side by side, it will be fun. It will not be a fair comparison by any means, but they're all similar enough blends that it will just be fun. I will be talking about them one at a time, though, so there's no actual need to do that. I'm going to be tasting them one at a time, and I'll just leave enough in my glasses to try them all side by side at the end. So that's just kind of the structure of this class. All of these are producers that I have worked with in the past, but all of these are new vintages to me. So it was really exciting to try a bunch of wines for this class, and I turned down a lot of wines that I just wasn't really happy with. But these four I was really thrilled with, and I thought they really showcased the beauty, but the rustic beauty that Southern Rhône is really known for. Power and elegance, but in a rustic way. Not this like very polished style of a lot of other regions in France. In fact, this area really didn't even become more popular until the late 80s, when Robert Parker was looking throughout the world for all of his big, intense, full-bodied, robust wines. Famous wine raider, Robert Parker, if you didn't know. And really discovered that he loved Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So it's one of the oldest, most regions in the entire world of French wine, established in 1920. So we're over 100 years old for the region's establishment overall. But in terms of popularity and global popularity, we're a little bit more recent history, which means the prices haven't skyrocketed in Southern Rhône like they have in much of the rest of the French wine world. Also, there's more wine produced in Southern Rhône because you're not limited to just these steep cliffs that are really hard to harvest in Northern Rhône. So Southern Rhône, honestly, in my book, outside of the Languedoc area, has some of the best values of wine, white and red, across the globe. So let's get started. I'm sure y'all are already done with your first wine. If you have tasting notes on this wine, please put it in the chat room. Super interested to hear. The grapes here that we are blending, classic white grape blend from Southern Rhône. Viognier, we all know that if we're tuning in from Virginia, Viognier is like the white grape of Virginia. Very floral white grape with lower levels of acidity naturally, and a little bit more tropical flavor. Grenache Blanc is like the little black dress of white wines. Can be dressed up in like this chameleon way, can turn into so many different things, but a very balanced kind of neutral grape almost that provides the backbone, the structure for white blends in this area. Roussanne is a weightier, a little bit more viscous style of grape, and Claret, sometimes made in a slightly sweet fashion, that has a lot of like sweet apple and pear notes. Really delightful how all four of these wines come together to make this wine. So we're in the Vento region, so Mount Vento. This is actually some of the most highest elevation regions throughout southern Rhône because we're in the foothills of Mount Vento. These vineyards are in. And this family has been around for about 50 years, I think 3 generations, if I remember correctly. They have a bunch of different styles of wine, red and white and rosé, but their terrasses label is meant to be like consumed young and fresh. It's never aged in oak. This is part stainless steel and part cement. And when we get to the reds, we'll talk more about cement versus oak and why that's so important in the southern Rhône Valley. And just really, really delightful, delightful wine. I love white Rhône blends. I can't tell you how many weddings and parties and dinner parties and events that I've planned around white and red Rhône blends. And that's because if you like Chardonnay, this has enough weight that you'll appreciate it. If you like Sauvignon Blanc, it has enough citrus notes. If you like sweeter wines, it's floral and tropical enough that you might also like it. If you like Pinot Grigio, it still has that crisp acidity. If you like almost any kind of white wine, I could serve you a glass of white Rhône wine, not specifically this wine or not specifically from Vento, and your guests are going to be pleasantly surprised. So if you're only picking one white and one red to serve at a party, white Rhône and a red Rhône, it really just is dramatically versatile and dramatically. It appeases all of the people. All right, so tell me what you think about this little bottle of white Rhône here. Blend. We will see a common denominator of a lot of these producers as well are going to be farming biodynamically. We will talk a little bit more about that, but if you want to know more, this definitely is not a class on biodynamics. I do have a YouTube video out on biodynamics, and in April, I'm going to be doing a Meet the Winemaker virtual class with a producer from France who has been farming biodynamically for years, decades even, and now travels all over the world giving conferences on biodynamic farm practicing, and he's going to do an event with us. So stay tuned for that if you want more information about what biodynamic is all about. All right, so tell us what you are getting in this wine. Steve Hill or Sunpop gets lemon, pineapple, peach, white pepper, green pepper, all very fresh green fruit. Yeah, I love that. There's a lot going on, but it's all fresh and vibrant. There's not funkiness or weirdness in the wine. It's just a really pleasant wine. There's a lot going on, but if you'll see a common denominator between all of these wines, like we talked about in Piedmont, if you tuned in last week, the common denominator was like elegance and floral components in all of the wines we had. Tonight, the common denominator that I find with all of these wines is charmingly rustic. So it's like all the weddings that people are doing now that are like shabby chic, barnyard chic, you know, the cowboy boots and lace kind of thing. That to me is what Southern Rhône wine tastes like. It's got this like elegance, but it's definitely not like super polished and put together. It's not Chanel No. 5 white silk shirt, pencil skirt. It's sundress and loose waves throughout the hair. So just charmingly rustic is to me what I love about these wines. So, all right, Chris gets fresh cut pear and some grapefruit, says Mary as well. I love that. I love, and of the pear, I'm getting like Asian pear, that sweet Asian pear. I'm getting brown pear, like the actual skins, a little bit more of that bitter component, and green pear as well. I'm getting so many different types of pear. Pear is definitely hanging out in my glass tonight. Love the citrus color too. I'm getting both lime, lemon, tangerine, and grapefruit. It's to me so many different pears and so many different types of citrus in this glass. So some pineapple, fabulous. Yeah, it's like Dole's pineapple in a can almost, just like that intense pineapple where you bite too far into the core and get that crunchy part of pineapple too. So it's that mix of that syrupy pineapple and the crunchy part of the pineapple too. So, oh man, love smelling this wine. I'm gonna taste it now. Is pear typical of Viognier? Great question. And honestly, to me, Viognier is such a, I use the word chameleon a lot with these grapes, but to me, they are chameleons. It picks up what the winemaker wants to express with it. So depending on when they harvest the grapes, it'll express something totally different. If they're waiting really late into the season to harvest it, I get way more of that pungent floral note and like, it's almost sticky. If they harvest it a little bit younger, I get more of the pear notes. But pear generally across the board, if I were going to pick one of these 4 grapes to really associate with the pear quality, it would be the Grenache Blanc. Apple and pear and like a light melon hint would be classic Grenache Blanc. I love Grenache, both Grenache Noir or red Grenache and Grenache Blanc. They're like my guilty pleasure wines when I just want to drink a damn glass of wine. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to analyze it. I don't want to write pages of notes. Drinking a glass of Grenache Blanc is like one of the most refreshing experiences to me because it's so lovely in an unassuming way. But definitely that pear. All right, class is over. I'm happy. It's such a nice wine. And it tastes like spring. I know we had that teaser day of spring. That was the day I got to taste these wines. I think that's why I fell in love with this wine so much, because it was like, spring is almost here. It's almost time to just really drink these wines and enjoy them. I love that slightly creamier palate to it. It weighs a little bit more than a lot of other white wines, but it doesn't linger in a heavy way. It doesn't sit and kind of like hang out too long in your mouth. It's refreshing, but also has a little bit more oomph to it. So let's see, it seems to be getting more floral notes as it warms up. Awesome. If you go back to this, if you just like leave the bottle on your counter or table, wherever you're tasting, go back to taste it at the end of the night. I'm curious to see how much more it will have developed. I'm guessing it gets a lot more tropical and a lot more like bodacious. So that is, and less of that like refreshing quality, more of that sinking quality. So feels kind of creamy in your mouth. Yes, I love it. And we really like it, James and Danielle says. Awesome. So glad you like that. I really enjoy this wine too. It's just so delightful. And it's really wonderful to know that you can get a high quality white blend that is farmed biodynamically. So they're taking the most care into the vineyards, making sure the entire ecosystem of their lands is the healthiest it can possibly be, so that they don't have to use a lot of chemicals in the vineyards or in the winemaking practice at all to make these spectacular wines. Awesome to know that, and that you're getting it for less than 20 bucks is a great thing. French wine, under $20, that's really delicious. It's sometimes hard to come by. So when you do, it's always a really exciting thing for me. So what would I pair this wine? I really want like a Mediterranean seafood pasta. I want something with a little bit of like green olives in it, not black olives. I want something with a little bit of that saltier cheeses, but I don't want something too acidic, right? So your wines always seem to be more acidic than your foods when you're doing food pairings. So don't think loads of like lemon in anything, because this wine isn't overly acidic. I would pair this with so think almost like I want orzo, and I want a little bit of feta in there, and I want some green olives, and I want it kind of tossed in a light vinaigrette with some like cold shrimp, cold grilled shrimp or something. I think it would be really interesting with something with a little bit of smoke or a little bit of char on it. So if you char grilled those shrimp, not overcook them, make sure they're not chewy, but so they're a little bit like charred on the outside, and then just toss them up in that salad. I think would be really delightful. If you can't tell, I am hungry. Let's see. Robert Scanlon says, first time I'm aware we tasted a claret. Are you going to pair scallop and, we're going to pair scallop and shrimp cakes. Yes, I love this. I also, like when I lived in DC, I lived right next to an Asian food mart, and they made these like shrimp pancakes, like seafood pancakes. So it was a mix of a bunch of different seafood, but it was a lot of shrimp. And but they were savory pancakes. You didn't put syrup on them, and they were so delicious. I could see that. I could also just see it with a plate of some cheese. I don't want charcuterie with this for sure, but I would love some cheese or some sandwiches. Man, some good tuna melt, and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're gonna play hooky for the rest of the day. Yeah, call me over. I'll be there. All right, so whenever you're ready, we're going to scallion shrimp pancakes. Thank you for cluing me in. I was like, I knew there's another key ingredient to the shrimp pancakes. Scallion shrimp pancakes, indeed. We're going to jump ahead now to the first red because I want to focus a little bit more on the red wines tonight. We are going to do the red stripe of Côte de Rhône. This is the Le Renjardière. I speak Spanish, not French, but Le Renjardière. I just made that up. I have no idea if that's correct, so do not quote me on this. This is by Pierre Dupont family. They have actually had this label since 1929. I think that they have had this label, and it's been in continuous use since then. These vineyards were actually kind of started to be cleared and harvested in the 1880s, but then this label came out in the 1920s and has remained the exact same, probably different type of paper and glue, and so it's really just cool to see how much history that this area really does hold on to. So pour yourself a glass of that. We're going to start talking about the reds. All right, my hair is driving me crazy. Talk too much with my hands and the hair gets in the way. All right, so let's talk about Côte de Rhône. What's up with Côte de Rhône? Let's see this map here. Literally anywhere where you see a colored region throughout the map, Côte de Rhône can be made there. Northern Rhône, Southern Rhône, this area right here in the middle. Everywhere here, if you're making wine from one of these regions, you can make a wine and classify it as Côte de Rhône. There are some areas that can only be classified as Côte de Rhône. They can't be classified as another area. So if you see right up on the top here, that kind of lime green color, Côte de Rhône, you'll see that color sprinkled throughout the entire area. But that doesn't mean that those are the only areas that make Côte de Rhône. You can make Côte de Rhône from any area. So just like in Hampton Roads, you can only call yourself Norfolk if you live within the Norfolk boundaries, but anywhere in the Norfolk boundaries, you can still call yourself Hampton Roads. So that's kind of the idea. And so what happens, and this is like the best secret you can learn from this region specifically, what happens is that if you're going to classify your wines as some of these more intensely regulated, specified, and qualitative regions, like we'll try next, Vaccaras or Châteauneuf-du-Pape, you have to follow a very stringent set of rules that include what grapes you can grow, how the wine can be made, how much you can make, which is a real key important factor, the minimum alcohol quantity, how the wine is aged, what it has to taste like. Some of these regions actually has to pass a taste test panel to make sure that the wine is good enough to have the name Châteauneuf-du-Pape on it, or the wine is good enough to have the name Vaccaras or Gigondas on it. So it's really important to understand this aspect of all French wine, but specifically in the Rhône Valley, because the quantity is limited on these higher end wine selections and wine labels. So let's say I am this producer here, Montirius. Let's be serious. This is Montirius, is how I kept remembering how to pronounce this. So Montirius, I'm making a Vaccaras here. And let's say, just for ease sake, that the rule is I can only make 10,000 cases of a wine, each vintage, for under the name Vaccaras. So if I make more than that, I'm flooding the market. I'm going to reduce the overall value on the global scale of Baccarat if I'm producing way more Baccarat than I should be. So if I'm only allowed to produce 10,000 cases of Baccarat, I have enough grapes to make 30,000 cases of wine. So I'm going to pick the best vines and the best grapes to make into the 10,000 cases and call it my Baccarat. And even maybe from there, I take the best of those and the oldest of those and call it my reserve label. So 10,000 total called Baccarat. Well, now what do I do with the 20,000 of this? I can't sell it for the price of Baccarat. I have to sell it below, which means I have to not age it in as much. I have to not take as much time into aging it. If it's aged in oak, maybe age it in less because oak is very expensive. And so what happens is I'm going to now use these 20,000 cases. I'm going to declassify the wine from Baccarat to just Côte de Rhône. And I'm going to sell an easy drinking Côte de Rhône, and I'm going to sell it for half the price of my Baccarat, because that way I don't lose any of my grapes. I don't lose any of the esteem and reputation of my Baccarat. I don't take away from the overall reputation of the region, but I ain't losing any money either. Most of these regions aren't selling off their grapes to other people like you do in California. You just buy, you have a bunch of grapes and you just sell them off to these mass-produced regions. Not really finding that in this area because there's not these huge mass-produced wines like we have in California. So they'll declassify their wines and call them Côte de Rhône, which just means the slopes of Rhône. And so, yes, you can be in Châteauneuf-du-Pape and be a Châteauneuf-du-Pape producer. And some of the vines, maybe they're really young and they didn't make the cut, or maybe just have a little bit too much. You can have a declassified Châteauneuf-du-Pape that's just labeled Côte de Rhône. So Côte de Rhônes can provide the best values like of all time in the French wine world. This producer right here again was, these vineyards were established in the 1880s. And it was all forest land. We're just north of Châteauneuf-du-Pape, which, so this area right here, this dark blue area around the city of Orange, which I feel like ironically they put blue there for a reason instead of orange. That dark blue area right in between Orange and Avignon is Châteauneuf-du-Pape. Just north of that is these regions here. So we're in that greenish area, Côte de Rhône village. We'll talk about that in just a sec. And so these vineyards, about 300 acres, I believe, maybe 305, don't quote me on that, were planted by Pierre Dupron's father or grandfather, great-grandfather, something like that. And it was all forest land. It took them years and years and years to clear this land all out, to actually plant these vines and tend the vineyards. But again, this producer has Les Renjardières, which translates to something that I'll remember as soon as we transition to the next wine, I'm sure. They put this red stripe on it and became kind of like the wine that was used all throughout Paris and stuff, and all these restaurants, and people are like, oh yeah, the red stripe of Côte de Rhône. So this producer actually, specifically this wine, this Côte de Rhône Rouge, kind of put Côte de Rhône on the map as a really delicious red wine that was used in a lot of restaurants around here. So if anyone looks up the information, what that translates to, Les Renjardières, then I hope no one who is watching this speaks French. If you do, I apologize. I'm not trying to be a jerk. All right, so let's get our noses here and smell this wine. This is a blend of Grenache, the most important grape of Southern Rhône, unlike the Syrah of Northern Rhône. Does have some Syrah in there though, and some Mourvèdre. So that's how it looks like it's pronounced, Mourvèdre. Basically, you swallow all of the R's in this word. So Mourvèdre is how it could be pronounced. But Mourvèdre, we understand what you're trying to say. It's a very difficult grape name to pronounce. And Cinsault is the fourth grape in here. There's just something charmingly rustic about this wine. Y'all are gonna get tired of hearing me say that. No oak aging on this wine either. Grenache, as a grape in and of itself, doesn't love oak. Plenty of grapes love oak. So oak imparts a lot of tannins to the wine. Now, tannins is that drying sensation in your mouth. It dries your mouth out. It feels like cotton balls are stuck in your mouth. It's also the bitter taste as well, like oversteeped tea, kind of assaults your gums sometimes, some of these wines. It comes from the skin of the grapes, the seed of the grape, the stem, basically everything that's part of the plant that is not the fruit itself, and oak that the wine was aged in. So, because oak is basically the stem of a tree. So same kind of thing. These polymers are found throughout plant life, but in the stemmy parts of the plant life. So Grenache is a thinner skin grape variety, which means the skin itself isn't imparting a lot of those tannins to the wine. So if you take a thinner skin grape variety that doesn't have a whole lot of natural tannins, and then you age it in oak, the oak just quickly overpowers everything. So unless you've got a significant amount of Syrah blended in, a significant amount of Mourvedre blended in, a significant amount of Cinsault part of the blend, then you really don't want to use a lot of oak. And if you to make sure it's not new oak that's going to take the wine, you want to let the delicate nature of these grapes speak for themselves. All right, let's see your tasting notes on this Côte de Rhône. Here it says, my husband says that this live stream is going to make him break his diet. You welcome. If a random sommelier from across the country made you it, then the calories don't count. So I fully endorse that. Just tell us what you're eating, so we can drool over here. Let's see. It says, not familiar with appellation d'origine protégée. So DOP. So basically, when France joined the EU and they're trying to streamline all of the EU wine laws, all of these regions, instead of AOC, turned into different things. So now AOP, or Appellation d'origine protégée, is the previous AOC. So the region designate of Châteauneuf-du-Pape or Vaccaras, they used to call it AOC, and that is just the French term, stands for the controlled origin of appellation, is now called the protected origin appellation, and that is just how they had to comply with EU law. So same thing happened in Italy and Spain. It's really frustrating because when you're studying these wine notes, we still study what the French call it, but you also have to learn what the EU calls it. But most people in the wine world, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. So you can use the exact same phrase and everyone understands what you mean. Let's see, so the Rhône doesn't limit vineyard production, so hectoliters per acre like in Burgundy. They limit what you can bottle. Great question. They do actually limit in these areas both. So you can only produce a certain amount of bottles for some of these best labelings and the actual vineyards themselves. So you might have a younger vineyard that is planted and producing a little bit more, but none of those grapes harvested from those regions can go into what you're calling Vaccaras or Gigondas or Châteauneuf-du-Pape or any of the other regions. So let's see, Mary gets jammy and Chris gets the barnyard. We have a little bit of fun in here, and we have these like stewy jammed fruits also. Yes, indeed. Let's see. Pop says, on the nose, I find this fairly bold with jammy dark fruit. Fabulous. A little Brett, so that barnyard funk. Way to go, Pop. Old leather and tobacco. How do you know what tobacco smells like?
I smoked when I was in 6th grade.
He says he smoked when he was in 6th grade. And the little green pepper. I love that. That's a lot going on in this wine. And yeah, I get all of these like stewed plums. And now as the wine is opening up in my glass, I'm getting a little bit more of this like stewed green note as well in it. So cool. Smells and tastes surprisingly earthy to me. Yes. So we've got these stewed fruits, but this is what makes, these are the tasting notes, what makes Southern red wine so rustic is like, it's always have this like earthy quality to it. So it's the girl in the sundress, barefoot, walking through the fields kind of thing. So it's like young vines, Melissa says. So, and Ada says, number 2, Alan tastes blackberries. Okay, awesome. So we're getting a lot of these darker fruits. Marian says, little spicy, peppery finish on this wine. So easy to drink. Totally agree with you. And also agree with the blackberry is great, plum and black pepper. Yes, all of the things. I'm gonna taste this one now.
You're not done with your journey.
There's this like vibrancy to the finish of the wine. Again, that makes it so easy to drink. Like it makes your mouth water a little bit, so you want another sip, another sip. Some wines, you take one sip and you're just knocked on your ass. It's just like kind of just assault all your senses. And some wines, they're so soft, you're like, I'm not really sure if anything's here. This wine, I think, is just a lovely balance of that light, refreshing, mouth-watering quality of wine, that juicy characteristic with enough weight and depth. And again, under 20 bucks, which in France is so hard to find. And really, really enjoy this wine. I love that hint of that barnyardy, leathery tobacco call, like pipe tobacco, not like cigar tobacco. It's like sweeter, a little bit more stewed. Yeah, I just think that this wine is lovely. I mean, I can see this with a roast beef sandwich, or I can see it with a more serious meal. Or this is now where we can start getting into the charcuterie world. And I'd recommend not going for anything too spicy. But it's got enough oomph to it that it can take some stronger flavors for sure. So are the tannins a bit green, Rick says? Yeah, get into this a little bit more. I'm getting like green flavors. I don't necessarily get that green tannic feel, that textural sensation, but I'm getting some green flavors, and I think that has more to do with the grape blends themselves. They might be picking them a little bit younger, or a little bit less ripe, not younger, but the grapes themselves, they're not letting, they're picking them when they're not fully raisinated on the vines. There could definitely be some greener tannin notes to it. And here's part of the problem that we're having with climate change is these areas that already are very sunny and very warm are now struggling to have their grapes ripen too fast before the phenolics ripen, so those tannins. So within the grape itself, throughout the growing season, the first part of the growing season, the only thing that the vine is concerned with developing in the grape itself are tannins, so those phenolics, and acids. They are not developing any sugars at all, which is why if you pick a grape way too early in the season, it will be the most bitter, sour thing you've ever put in your mouth in your entire life. As the phenolics start to fully ripen, which means the seed has now been fully developed, then the grapevine will send different genes and tell the plant to produce more sugars in the actual berry. Those sugars then will start, for red grapes, will start as the sugars develop, will turn the grape skin from green to red, called veraison, signaling to the bird, hey, it's dinner time. And so if, though, as it starts warming up throughout the season, the grape starts sending sugars, or the vine, starts sending sugars to the grape earlier if it gets really warm. So if you have a heat spike in the middle of the summer, before it would normally start sending sugars to the grape, now it's starting to send sugars to the grape because it's like, oh, it's already towards the end of summer. We need to send sugars to the grape to make sure that the birds eat this grape. So before the phenolics have fully developed, those tannins and acids have fully developed, now the sugars are developing. So by the time you need to pick it before the grape goes bad, the sugars are developed, the fruit is there, but you do have some of these like greener tannin tasting, like not fully ripened, a little bit bitter because they haven't fully ripened. So we're having problems across the wine world in any of these warmer wine regions so you can't pick it too early because the sugars haven't developed. You can't, here, the sugars are developed, but the tannins aren't developed. But if you wait too long, then the grape just turns in. It tastes like you're drinking raisin wine, which is not delicious. So if you're getting that, it's definitely part of the problem of climate change and how the farmers are dealing with that in the vineyards. So great question. Sorry to go off on climate change, but it's important to know. All right, other questions on this wine? Let's see. Beautiful and dark fruit. Hard to believe it's 14.5% alcohol. Yep, that is that right fruit, baby. Wait till we get to the Chateau Neuf de Pape. Ada Lester says, if a French bottle is under 20 here, how much is it in the village market? Oh yeah, I mean, these are table wines that like any restaurant in this area would probably pour this at like, you know, $1 carafe kind of thing. So definitely tariffs have increased French wine prices, the price of shipping, especially during COVID. So even in the last year alone, prices have gone up on this. When I featured this last time, it was before COVID, and the price was, I think, $15. So I apologize, but that is the nature of the world we live in. Pairs nicely with Iberico chorizo. Fabulous. It sounds super delicious. That smoky kind of paprika note to it would be delightful with this wine. There's a richness not always found in Côte de Rhône. Yes, I think this wine has a lot more integrity than a lot of Côte de Rhônes. Truly delicious. Kira says, very interesting. We've been wondering about ways climate change makes their impact. Yes, it's a huge thing. You will not talk to a single winemaker that does not struggle with it. Sometimes they struggle with the fact that they're making much better wines now as a result, but they know it's not going to be a forever thing. So it is interesting. All right, whenever you're ready, we are going to move on to the Vaccaras. Monterius. We're going to be very serious now. I'm drinking this Monterius or Monterius. Again, I have no idea. So this is a Vaccaras. The label is Garrigue, is how this is pronounced. Garrigue is the name of these local clusters of herbs that they grow there. So think herbs to Provence. So you've got rosemary and lavender, and I think thyme grows here too. Herbs to Provence. Someone tell me what else is in herbs to Provence. I'm trying to blank right now. But all of these grow throughout all of the land, right? And these herbs to Provence, not just in Provence, France. Provence is just slightly further south than we're drinking right now. They grow throughout this land too, and so all throughout this area, they'll kind of harvest them, put them in these bunches, kind of tie them up, and hang them, and they dry in kitchens and cellars and storage areas all over the place. So that's called a garrigue, that dried bunch of herbs that is super prevalent all throughout the southern Rhône area. They cook with them, and so often the wines will smell quite floral like this. And I think that this wine of the three has the most like floral aromatics to it. And to me, all of those herbs are like more on the floral side of herbs. So lavender has that more floral note. Rosemary, you know, definitely has that really pungently floral note. Tarragon, oregano, all of those things. So that's Garrigue. So you'll often see on Rhône labels, you'll see Cuvée de Garrigue, Garrigue something, Domaine de Garrigue, Clos de Garrigue. So Garrigue, you will see on about 30% of all your Rhône wine labels somewhere on there, whether the chateau or the producer is named after it, or they'll just label a specific wine Garrigue. So very common. And if you're wondering, is that a vineyard site? Is that a region? No, it's just the name of the local dried herb bunches that are a huge part of their cuisine, and thus a huge part of wine culture, because wine and food go together. So tell me what you're smelling in this wine. This wine, and as y'all get your noses in there, talk a little bit about what Vaccaras is.
Nice.
So here is Chateau Neuf de Pape. Just so where you see the label of Orange, or the city of Orange, where the E is this tiny region of like what color is that? Light green, mint green, or something like that. That is the area of Vaccaras. Vaccaras sits on the south-facing slopes of this hill. On the other side, we have Gigondas. Gigondas is probably, I'd say, the older sister who bosses around the younger brother a whole lot. The younger brother is Vaccaras. The older sister is Gigondas. And she's definitely considered to be the more elegant and polished and esteemed. Like, she's the most mature. She's got her shit going on, you know, got a career. And And then Baccarat is way more rustic, like, let me just, travel the world around with a backpack kind of guy. So a little bit more down to earth, less of this like serious wine, and definitely more on the rustic side, but can be super, super, super delicious and definitely cost less than Gigondas. So higher elevation vineyards in Gigondas produce just more of that intensely complex and balanced wines than Baccarat, which can be a little bit off kilter, but again, in a charmingly rustic way. So this specific wine is 70% Grenache, 30% Syrah. Now, throughout Côte d'Rône, you don't have a specific blend that is specified to call it Côte d'Rône. It could be all Syrah, it could be all Grenache, it could be a mix of the two, it could be a mix of 10 different grapes. It really doesn't matter with Côte d'Rône. When you get to Gigondas and Baccarat, they're very specific. So Gigondas actually has to be 85% Grenache, only 15% Syrah. Baccarat is about 70-30. So minimum has to be 70, can be up, but they have to be a blend of the two. You can't have 100% Grenache and call it Baccarat. So slightly different blend compositions. And again, how they specified that as the distinguishing factor, they didn't ask me to help them come up with those rules, but that was traditionally how it was always done. So they want to maintain the reputation and the personality of the region. So if one producer over here is making Baccarat and he's doing a 50-50 Grenache Syrah blend, and this other producer that's been around for years has been doing the classic 70-30 blend, it's confusing to the market what's going on. So I think a lot of it is just preserving the historicity of how these wines were classically made. Baccarat is one of the newest AOCs or AOPs or regional designated regions of origin to the Southern Rhône. So we're talking that's achieved its own status, but definitely coming up there in terms of quality and name recognition. So let's talk real quick about Côte d'Rône. These other regions up here, like Gigondas, Baccarat, and Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and everything in between. So everything in between can be like the middle tier of quality, can be called sorry. I was thirsty. Can be called Côte d'Rône Village. So you have Côte d'Rône, which again can be declassified from any of these regions, made anywhere in Northern or Southern Rhône, although 90% of it is from Southern Rhône. And then if you go up a step in quality and you're producing terroir-specific wines, so wines from a specific region or village, then you can, based on that village, there's about 17 of them throughout Southern Rhône, can be called Côte d'Rône Village or villages. But village is how that is pronounced. So Côte d'Rône Village. So there's about 17 of these, and after you can call it Côte d'Rône Village. So can I see the Baccarat bottle? So Baccarat used to be one of those villages. So they would call it Côte d'Rône Village, and underneath it Baccarat. Then basically they proved their status and their reputation over a few decades. That's how long it takes in the French wine world to like receive that recognition. Kind of like my parents. No, I'm just kidding. just making sure someone's paying attention over there. And she wasn't. She spit out her wine. That was great. Sorry, I couldn't not throw that out there. So Côte d'Rône Village, they would call it Baccarat. And then finally, they received their own recognition. Like, all right, you don't actually have to call it Côte d'Rône Village anymore. You're just Baccarat. You're not even associated with the rest of Côte d'Rône Village. You are your own human, your own person, your own personality. Your wines speak and stand on their own. So it's every Côte d'Rône Village. They're those individual villages. It's their aspiration to finally become their own thing. So I think the latest one to do so was the village of Vento, which looks like Vins Sobers. I love wines from there. And so Baccarat used to be kind of the cheapest AOC region in Southern Rhône, and now Vin Sobera is just below that because they're the newest fully name recognized wine region, or AOC, that's not Côte d'Rhône Village, that graduated from Côte d'Rhône Village. So if you're wondering about what the difference is between Côte d'Rhône Village, and then these regions, now you know. It's all about just tiers of quality. And as you go up in those tiers of quality, the restrictions go up as well. So let's get our noses in this wine. I'm so curious to see what you are smelling and tasting in this wine. So if you're ever wondering, so the tags that I put on all of these wines, I write my wine reviews early in the morning, so usually like 9:30 in the morning, because that's when your palate is the freshest, and that's when you don't have like the stress of the day kind of affecting your wine tasting. And so sometimes you can tell how much coffee I've had if you look at how many exclamation marks are in these wine reviews. And this one, my notes are the fruits, the spice, the florals, the leather, the herbs, the earthiness. I think I just finished a pot of coffee on this wine. So, but I do get all of those things in this wine. I'm just very excited about it at 9:30 in the morning. So, all right. Gloria says, definitely smells herbaceous. Also get some black and blue fruit in there too. I like the blue fruit call, which to me Grenache often has, that it only has if they don't over extract the wine. So those pomegranate notes, the blueberry notes, that are a little bit more of the delicate, subtle notes of wine that get overpowered by the cherries and blackberries and plums and all that stuff, and currants, that if you don't over extract the wine, those delicate blue fruits can come out. So I love that you got that. Definitely agree. So Ada says, wow, I normally can't smell wine, but I sure can on this one. Yes, indeed. With herbs, it reminds me of spaghetti sauce. Yeah, that's why they call it garrigue, because it smells like they took that garrigue dried herb bunch and just kind of dipped it in the wine and let it steep for a little bit. And now we're smelling the product of that. So Lisa says, rosemary, fennel. I love it. Thyme, basil, tarragon, dill, oregano, lavender, chevril, and marjoram. Never cooked with that. I need to smell that. So those are the actual herbs in Herbs to Provence. Okay, good to know. I always forget about fennel, that anise, that green licorice kind of characteristic. So glad to know. I need to memorize this list, and I need to go smell some marjoram, because I've never cooked with that. I don't actually know what it smells like. So let's see here. Thank you for looking that up, Lisa. I appreciate that. By the way, I've had a note from one of my people that says I need a moderator to go through the chat room so that they can pull out the things that I've missed. So maybe next class I'll have that moderator. Some Pop says definitely more Brett, but not too much to get earthy, peppery fruits and almond paste. Okay. There can't be a virtual class without Some Pop saying a very off the beaten path tasty note. Almond paste. All right. I'm gonna go smell some almond paste after this and dig into it. Someone says mushrooms. Okay, so we got this like on the nose. So mushrooms on the nose. So we got this like kind of dank earthy. So not dry earth, not dusty. It's definitely like dank, like peat, putting soil, peat moss, mushroomy kind of thing. Logs that have fallen in the forest that are just crumbling and super soft. I enjoy that. Rick says herbs, pepper, maybe a bit of barnyard. Yes, we're getting that barnyard characteristic. Definitely well integrated. To me, it's very well integrated. That Brettanomyces or fungus that gives that barnyard is not overpowering the rest of the wine. There's so much going on in this wine. It was hard to be overpowering the rest of the wine. Rockeras is less than 3.5 square miles, yes, which is why it's so hard to point out on the map. So that little tiny thing that's in the letter E, yes, it's a tiny, tiny region. Awesome. So between the two, can you tell a dramatic difference in complexity and balance from the Côte d'Rhône to the Vacras? Or to you, maybe you like the Côte d'Rhône better, but to me, the biggest and most obvious jump when you just go from Côte de Rhône to either Côte de Rhône Village or an AOC region is the intensity of the switch and complexity. There's so much more going on in this wine, and the balance. The wine is more pulled together. Still rustic, still a little off kilter, but so much more pulled together in the kind of starbursty, jazzy way that the Côte de Rhône was. Yeah, this wine is powerful and definitely is unmistakably Vacheras in every sense of the word. Super, super delicious. Awesome. All right. See, Alex says, coming from people who do not have sensitive palates and noses, do you also have this much sensitivity when it comes to food? Great question. Could you reverse engineer a recipe just by tasting a dish? Certainly, both things are somewhat related, but it's all about practice. So I practice doing these types of tasting notes on wine multiple times a day, obviously. Just that's the nature of my job. I don't practice it with food. I'm a terrible cook, and I only know how to use salt and pepper, and I use them wrong every time. So I don't have as much experience with that. I have worked with amazing chefs, and I can put together some amazing pairings. I just can't cook the food myself. So no, I am definitely not the super taster that can literally taste a dish and tell you every single baking spice or herb that was used in the dish. That definitely comes, you're either born with that or you practice that. And I just don't practice that with food enough. When it comes to food, I enjoy how food and wine come together and make each other better. So I'm really good at the science of the food and wine pairing, but I'm not good at the reverse engineering, tasting notes from food and figuring out what the dishes are. When it comes to just smelling something and be able to name the smell, yes, but I was not born like that. I'm not born a super taster. That just came with a lot of practice, especially and that's not just wine. That's going into a grocery store. And every time I am doing something, I close my eyes and focus on the smell and try and commit that smell to memory. When I go on walks, especially in the spring, I'm smelling every flower and being like, oh man, this flower smells so different than this flower, and the flower smells different than the leaf of this plant. So I love being able to name that thing I smell, but I'm not good when it comes to the tasting notes of food. But great question. I will be honest, that's not my strong suit. And I don't know if I'd want it to be those super tasters that can pick that out. They're some of the pickiest eaters, and it's really hard for them to really enjoy food. And then I would never eat because my food is inedible. So unless you just are willing to just chug it down. So Gloria says, I love it. My favorite so far of the Garrigue. Fabulous. James says, we went to smell wine number 4 and then went back to number 2 and was amazing how much more the tobacco smell came out of number 2. It's crazy how the smells change. Absolutely. So if you keep enough in your glass or just go back to them and try them again, you will be very surprised, hopefully, how all of these wines have developed. I think I decanted the Chateauneuf de Pape for not as long as I recommended everybody else. I told everyone 3 hours if you had the time. I didn't have the time today. So I'm curious to see how it's going to taste. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this Chateauneuf de Pape. So last one. Chateauneuf de Pape. This is Clos Saint-Jean or Clos Saint-Jean. And Vieilles Vignes, right on the top here that you'll see, just means old vines. We'll talk about what that means in just a second. It says non filtré, which is non-filtered wine, 2017 vintage. And check out the bottom corner of that bottle. Just a measly 16% alcohol. Welcome to climate change and Chateauneuf de Pape. So it's actually... I have yet to find a recent vintage of Chateauneuf de Pape that was not 15 or over. So, which will change drastically the way these wines will age, because after about 13.5%, 14%, the wines become more volatile. So don't think like port. Well, port has 22% in it, ages for decades and decades. That's because the sugar content in it allows it is the preservative. So higher alcohol content without the sugar increases the volatility of a wine. So I am curious to see, in 20 years from now, how these current vintages of Chateauneuf de Pape will be aging. But honestly, people more and more are drinking their wines younger rather than aging them. So it might be only a problem for a few people. Rick, I'm curious to see, I know you have a lot of Chateauneuf de Pape in your cellar. I'm curious if you look back at other vintages, what the alcohol percentages was in those wines from the 90s versus what it is now. If you ever are curious and you're digging through your cellar and you want to let me know, I'd be very curious to know. So let's talk about, while you get your noses in here. Oh, this wine, wow. Man, I thought the last one had a lot of that Garrigue note, but this one just smells like Garrigue. This one smells like I'm a cowboy and I'm smoking that Garrigue in a pipe by a campfire, kind of with like a bearskin rug on a log. But I've got a basket of fruit that's too close to the fire. There we go. I figured I'd say that before my dad. And I'll give my challenge to my dad now. Puppy, you have to one-up me on a story of what this wine smells like. Very competitive family over here. So, all right. So as we're smelling and tasting this wine, we'll talk about a little bit about what Chateauneuf de Pape is. So again, one of the oldest designated regions in France. So the AOC was actually designated in 1920. I think Bordeaux and parts of Burgundy and Champagne were around the same time. So very, very, very old region. So clearly early recognized as a premium wine region. Again, Chateauneuf de Pape here is in between the cities of Orange and Avignon. So the name translates to the new house or the new castle of the Pope. So in the early 14th century, I think 1309, there was a contest between the popes, and one pope was like, all right, I'm going to move to Rome, from Rome to Avignon and set up my new house there. And since then, now it is just the one pope, the Roman Catholic Church, but they've always had a second house now in Avignon. So the contest is no longer around between who's the real pope, but there is always this second house here. And thankfully for us, the popes that were in succession for that first about 60 years or 75 years were all very, very focused on wine. They were huge wine fanatics, really loved wine, and really focused a lot of the efforts of the church themselves into tending the vineyards. Because why have communion if you're just going to sell, if you're just going to serve the basic stuff, we gonna serve the real good stuff for our communion, I guess, they're sacramental wines. And we're grateful for them because it produced this history of wine that is unlike any other in the area. So if you notice on the bottles here, you have this embossed, this is the papal hat right here. It says Chateauneuf de Pape. So you can only emboss your bottles like this in France if you are a Chateauneuf de Pape producer. So it is illegal for anyone else to be like, well, I'm going to emboss my bottles, but I'm from the Languedoc, or I'm from Burgundy, or I'm from Champagne. You can only do that if you're a Chateauneuf de Pape producer. It doesn't have to be a Chateauneuf de Pape bottle, but say this producer right here also has vineyards in Vacros. They could also emboss, they could say Chateauneuf de Pape like this one does in their embossing, but they could have an embossed symbol on the bottle. You have to be a Chateauneuf de Pape producer, but all of the embossings are very papalistic, very religious, and just speaking of that history of how long the history of this wine has been very connected to the Roman Catholic Church. So the rules and regulations are obviously very intense. Catholics know how to really, really step up the rules. And there are so many rules that go into the making of this wine. But they allow for the most amount of grape varieties out of any of the regions, any of the AOC regions in Southern Rhône. You have the most allowance of different grape varieties. So there's actually 18 grape varieties that are allowed to be grown and made into Chateauneuf de Pape. Most people, if you've heard it said 13, that is like classically what most people know, because in 1936, it was established that only those 13 could be allowed. 5 grapes, very, very old vines that were very rare to be grown, were still growing and being used by certain few producers. So those few producers are still making those, but like very, very, very minuscule amounts. Those 5 different grapes that I don't even remember what they are, because it's like Picpoul Blanc, Tourette Noir. No, that's a classic one. Picpoul Gris too. There's a bunch of there's 5 grapes that I can't remember them. Don't quiz me on this now. And in 2008, they finally amended the original rule of 1936 that said, all right, those other 5 grapes can be allowed, because those famous producers that have been growing those in minuscule amounts didn't want to rip up their vines. They still wanted to use them, but they wanted to make sure that they could still call it Châteauneuf-du-Pape if they were using them. So there are technically 18. You really never hear about the last 5. The 13 of them are the most important. 8 of those are red. The rest are white. And like Northern Rhône, now we have the ability for red wine to be co-fermented or blended with white wine and still be called that same red wine region of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. So you can make a white Châteauneuf-du-Pape. They're so rare, but they're so absolutely stunning and beautifully expressive. Some of the best wines that I've had, a Châteauneuf-du-Pape Blanc. I've probably had one less than 12 occasions my entire life, but highly recommend if you ever get your hands on one to enjoy it. But Châteauneuf-du-Pape Rouge is where it's all about, and they can be a blend of all 13 grapes, including the 5 white grapes. This one right here is not a blend of all 13, but we do have quite a bit. So we've got Grenache, primary one, of course, Syrah, Mourvedre, the GSM classic blend, Cinsault, Vacquerès, and Muscardin. We've got, 6 of the 8 grape varieties. There's none of these are the white grape varieties, but there's plenty of producers that will do all of them. If you notice on the back label right here, Eric Salomon Selections, he's big into Rhône wines, and Rhône blends from around the world too. Some of his wines that he imports from Spain that are Rhône blends, similar styled grapes meaning, are really delicious. So Eric Salomon, who is like this badass rock star, he's like 6'3", real skinny, as this rock star haircut, always wears these like leather blazers and skinny jeans and rock star shoes. Cool cat for sure. Really knows his wines. I got a chance to meet him one time. It was like one of my wine celebrity moments. But if you start liking wines and notice that it's his name on the back, just start looking for his names more often. He imports some really, really amazing stuff.
Is he single?
No, and he's like in his 60s, so slightly older than my typical dating range. But great question. My mom asked if he was single. Getting me back for that joke I made on it earlier. So now that I'm blushing again, I'm gonna forget here's the one rule that I love talking about every time I talk about Châteauneuf-du-Pape. They are so intense on the rules here that in the 1950s, they amended the laws of Châteauneuf-du-Pape region, which hadn't been amended since 1936, first stated 1920. In the 1950s, they're like, you know what? We need to make sure that if there's ever an alien invasion, they can't land their UFOs in these vineyards, because we want to make sure we're still able to make really good wine for the new alien dynasties that come along. So it is now on the books for Châteauneuf-du-Pape that is illegal to land a UFO in the vineyards of Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And this was during like the sci-fi craze of the 1950s, where everyone was sure that like aliens are trying to communicate with Earth, and what are we gonna do about it? Since then, the craze has obviously gone away a little bit. Now it's just the crazy that's kind of like remnant, but they keep it on the books because it's like, this is part of our history, and they're so tied to their history. It's part of like the local legend. So that's my favorite thing. When I found that out, I think I was studying Châteauneuf-du-Pape 21 years old, I was like, what's about this Châteauneuf du Pape? And I found that out, and all these years, every time I talk about Châteauneuf du Pape, I use the opportunity to talk about this fun law because I just think it is hysterical. So make sure all of your alien friends know that they should land to the north, maybe in Côte-d'Or-en-Village or maybe Vaccaras, not Châteauneuf du Pape. So classic terroir here. They have these huge galets, the river rocks that I was talking about earlier, these white river rocks that are washed perfectly smooth, but very, very large. So the Romans called them the rocky river roads. So as the rivers have receded and have left these rocky terrains, it's so smooth that you could just like walk on them. So really, really interesting. What happens here is they retain the heat, the sunlight that's coming, and bounce it back onto the leaves themselves, increasing photosynthesis, which is important as these Les Mistral winds are coming through, cooling down the vines. You want to make sure you're still having some of the heat to ripen the grapes. Again, we're having less of the need for this as climate change warms up the area. But for many years, it's what created these wines to be so powerful when all of the other wines were kind of lighter and softer, is because of these white rocks reflecting the light and heat back onto the vine, kind of increasing the photosynthesis and the ripening of those grapes. What is interesting too is this is causing one of the overstimulating effects of this region. So Vincent Van Gogh was painting in this area near Avignon when he went crazy, cut off his ear to send to his lover, and they have since done some studies to figure out what was wrong with him. Did he just have a mental illness? Like what caused this? And they've done studies now for people living in this area and have noticed that there is actually a very high rate, like a disproportionate rate of people with suicidal tendencies, with lots of mental illnesses and diseases in this area. And they attribute it to the overstimulation of the climate, basically, that's happening. So remember we were talking about the Les Mistral winds that are howling through. I mean, we're talking about gales that don't just like, again, hurricane season, 1 week, we have howling winds. Kind of constantly this like howling winds on top of brilliant sunlight all the time with very little cloud cover that is now reflecting off all these white rocks. So think when you go skiing in the snow and you have a migraine at the end of the day because it's so bright because the light is reflecting off the snow. So that's what's happening with these rocks, reflecting the light back to people's eyes. So it's this overstimulation of the senses that your brain doesn't get to rest fully. And so they attribute, they think that, they're speculating here, that part of the reason that these grapes are so amazing, that the wines are so incredible and unique, is also the reason that the people are literally going crazy in this region. So really fascinating to see just the mix of biology and climate and the human factor and how each one affects the other. So that's what's so unique about the Châteauneuf du Pape areas, those galets, they're called, those pebbles or stones that are not pebbles that we think of. We're talking like river rocks, huge areas. So really, really interesting. These wines, definitely the most powerful, but also the most elegant. So Vaccaras has all the power. Gigondas has some power and elegance. Châteauneuf du Pape is just like the epitome of both. What are y'all smelling and tasting in this wine? Great question. Oh my gosh, Rick says he has one bottle in the wine fridge upstairs, 83 Chateau Beaucastel, one of the most esteemed producers of all of Châteauneuf du Pape, 13.5% alcohol. Yeah, that is the sweet spot for aging wine. So 1983. I think it's about time to drink that now. So next week when I make a delivery to you, I'll plan on stopping there for an hour or so and we can have a glass. Just kidding, but that's really fabulous. Let's see here. Let's see if I'm missing anything. Mouthfeel of number 4 was very heavy when switching between 3 and 4. Didn't notice it until the wine tasted the wine side by side. Number 3 was like water compared to number 4 like milk. Oh my word. It just coats your mouth. It just hugs every part. Gums, your teeth, cheeks, your tongue. Finish is so beautiful. It's definitely this very rich, velvety blanket kind of thing. Definitely not summer wine for sure, but also not like a huge Cabernet or Shiraz or something like that. It's definitely not an assault on the senses, but it fully coats that palate and it leaves like no part of your mouth unexplored. Whew, wow. All right, so now I'm going to do it. I'm going to go back to number 3 and see if I have the same experience. Yeah, totally different. I don't sense it at all now on my palate, on my mid palate, number 3. It's like the wine just died away. It's something so powerful and full of the Chateauneuf de Pape that was missing. And the Grenache seems a lot more rustic and more of that funk than the pure elegance and finesse of this Chateauneuf de Pape. But it's elegance and finesse like through a loudspeaker. Mm-hmm. This is not quiet, demure elegance and finesse. It's like CEO power woman elegance and finesse. So,
read my note.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let me see my dad's notes here. Okay, number 4 smells like the blackberry, blueberry, cobbler. Oh, sorry, not that note.
The next one, the personality.
Oh, this wine is a mid-50-year-old woman who's the CEO of a major company in New Jersey, but drives a Ford F-250 pickup truck. Yes, I love it. All right, so CEOs for the win. Female CEOs, I love it. Yes, there's so much like this like floral elegance to it, but earthy power structure to it as well. So, all right, that's fabulous. Good on you, Papa. Gloria says, get a mix of vanilla or some other sweet spice and cherry. Absolutely, as well as that same earthy tone that's carried throughout the wines of tonight. So yes, all that earthy tone, that fruit tone, that rustically charming or charmingly rustic characteristic, just to the nth degree and more of the charm and a little bit less of that rustic, but still there. So the switch between 3 and 4 was insane. Definitely like 3, but surely wouldn't drink after 4. I know, that's why like trying them side by side is informative, but it kind of ruins you for the first 2 reds. And so I apologize about that. Marion says, black currant and some pepper, nice concentration, good structure, serve to impress. Yes, indeed. Even if it's just to impress yourself. Like, look how smart I am drinking Chateauneuf de Pape on a Monday afternoon. I'm a great wine drinker. Yes, impress yourself by drinking this wine on a regular basis. Chateauneuf de Pape is Tom's happy go-to wine. Awesome. It's fabulous. Yeah, I love Chateauneuf de Pape. It's definitely not everyone's affordable daily drinker wine, but when you can drink them, it's really fantastic. And I got a super great deal on this wine. Nobody's buying these high-end wines right now during COVID, all the restaurants that normally buy these up. So it means these warehouses are offering these like discounts. So I was able to pass that along to y'all. Normally, so what I was going to do is serve a Baccarat and a Gigondas side by side, and then add the Chateauneuf de Pape as an optional 5th bottle add-on because I just couldn't afford to put it in the 4-pack and keep the price the same for this 4-pack. But then they told me the sale price of this wine. I was like, great, let's do it. So I'm super glad that y'all all got to try this Chateauneuf de Pape because I love talking about the aliens. So awesome. So I'm curious now to go back to the Côte d'Rône here. I just want to hang out with that Chateauneuf Pape. I just want that to sit in my glass for another hour, me to just keep revisiting it. Oh yeah, I'd have to start all over and drink the white and then like go back up in progression. After that Chateauneuf de Pape, it's real hard to drink either of those reds right now. I mean, not hard, not difficult. Put a gun to my head, I guess I can do it. But harder to get as excited about them as I did when I first tried them. That's part of the slippery slope of this, right? So once you fall in love with these really beautiful wines, it makes it that much harder to enjoy wine at some of my friends' houses. And so that's why it's always good to have a cocktail, like a gin and tonic that you can get anywhere and be super happy with when you don't want to drink someone else's wine. But no matter what, I think if you're drinking wine, you're on the right journey. And I love that wine brings people together, and everyone's on a different part of their journey, right? Like from huge collectors like Rick and Julie Morrison, who's talking about the 83 Chateau Beaucastel, Chateau Neuf de Pop, to someone who's like, this is my first French wine, and I don't know how to experience these. From anywhere on there, I just tasted wine with someone last week, and they had literally never had a wine before. They had never had wine before. So it's just so exciting that no matter what, everyone's on a different part of the journey, but we're all on a wine journey, or at least a lot of us. And so that's the important part, is just to like constantly expand your horizons and learn new things, and appreciate how it brings us all together. So, all right, Robert Scanlon says he disagrees. The second one still holds its own after number 4. I need to go back and drink some more to figure it out. So awesome. Well, was there any big takeaway of tonight besides the aliens? I know everyone's going to say the aliens, Chateau Neuf de Pop. But was there any big takeaway about Southern Rhône? Are you going to look for Southern Rhône now when you shop a wine shop or a restaurant wine list? You know, and we can go back out to restaurants. Are you going to think again about Côte de Rhône as an option for a wine that you go to regularly? And was there any of these wines that was super surprising, either in a bad way, like, man, I thought I was going to love that and I hated it, or that one was so surprising to me that, you know, I liked the Côte de Rhône the best out of all of the 4 or something. So, see, Roberts, the second wine didn't disappear as much as the 4th, but not the 3rd. Okay, I'm a little confused here, but I think I need to drink another glass of wine to get the numbers. So James says, number 2 changed so much, even in the 1.5 hours of the class. Danielle really liked number 1. Yeah, I figured she would. Y'all, this has the weight and body of the white wines that y'all really enjoy. So I was hoping that you would like it. So Alex says, I agree, Robert, except for me, I still preferred number 3 out of all. I'm actually going to try the white and then try the next 2 reds. Just see. Ooh, so much berries on this wine. I got a lot more of the earthiness, but all those berries coming out. Okay, definitely has a lot more power and texture to it, going from the white to that one, then straight from the Chateau Neuf. Try the Baccarat. This is when I get a little tipsy when I'm doing power tastings at the end of the class. Yeah, I want to sit and enjoy these a little bit more. They're definitely more thought-provoking wines that higher alcohol content, harder to toss them back. But really interesting wines, really amazing lineup. So next week, just so you know, is the Pinot family class. We're going to be talking about Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier for the 2 reds, and we're going to do Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc, I think I decided. Yes, for the whites. So 2 whites and 2 reds. We're going to talk about the family dynasty of the Pinot family and how they all evolved from one grape originally and spread throughout the world. So really interesting. And so it's not going to be a side-by-side to like figure out, are these similar in characteristics? That's like figuring out if you, when you do a 23andMe test, are similar enough to your super long distant cousin that you've never met from 12 generations back that lives in France. Like, we're not going to do a comparative tasting like that. We're going to be talking about the history and then just talking about the grapes themselves, where they're grown and what they taste like. So it'll be really interesting. Then we go into, I can't believe it, March. And I will release next week, hopefully on Monday, the class schedule for March, which will include a Meet the Winemaker event from Lioka Winery. Super fun. Very entertaining guy. He will have you in stitches. He's just hysterical. And so he's going to be really entertaining. That'll be March 13th. I think it's the Saturday, the second Saturday. But every Saturday now, basically March through April I have planned out. And then we'll see as May happens, as things continue to open up more. But at least for March and April, we're going to keep them every Saturday night. So really look forward to seeing y'all on a regular basis. And until I see you again, please email me if you have any questions about the wines about how to age them, about how to order more of them, and if you want to reserve your spot in any of the future classes. Look forward to seeing y'all then. Until I do, though, cheers, you all. Stay well, stay safe, and stay slightly tipsy on Rhône wines.